Listen, if we talked back in middle school and high school and I made fun of you for being basic and thinking Goblet of Fire was the best Harry Potter book, I sincerely apologize. I've seen the light now and I understand. I still think you're wrong, but I understand. Alright, so Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire is the fourth entry into the Harry Potter series, and fire is right, because for most of this book, Rowling was cooking. This is probably the first book in the series so far that I honestly felt didn't have any pacing issues, and the characterization of almost everyone in this book is the best in the series so far. Like, I've always remembered liking Goblet of Fire, and I don't know if it's because of the movie that I don't remember it as fondly as I do the others, but after this reread, if we were talking about Cold Stone sizes, I moved from like it to love it. I'm not sure if I'm at gotta have it levels yet, but I might be with some more time. I honestly don't have any idea how prevalent Cold Stone is outside of the United States, so hopefully that joke lands. Anyway, moving away from the aggressive sizing metrics at an ice cream shop and back to Harry Potter, I firmly believe that the Goblet of Fire movie was one of the worst PR jobs a movie adaptation has ever done for a book, because Goblet of Fire is way more fun to read than watch. So much of that is due to the characters and how their interactions with Harry slowly help turn the tone of the series into a darker one, and while the humor and the mystery don't vanish from the book, it definitely switches from a story about students discovering magical secrets to the beginning of a, moderately well-written war saga. And it does it without beating you over the head with the cover and saying, "We're a serious book now." It's still fun, it still has life to it, but it's not shying away or backing away from the ideas that we're going to go darker and you need to be ready for it. The way the story transitions throughout the first 5 chapters is a perfect example of this. Chapter 1 is told from the caretaker Frank's point of view, where we learn he was accused of the murders that befell the Riddle family. However, no evidence sticks since Frank was not the murderer. Rather, it was Voldemort, who was still Tom Riddle at the time, who'd come to kill his family using Avada Kedavra, the killing curse. Which is just fantastic setup for the Horcrux mystery that comes later in the series, but staying on that chapter, it ends with Frank being killed by Voldemort after overhearing Voldemort's plan for the year to kill Harry. And this time, he has help in Pettigrew and, as we learn later, Barty Crouch Jr. But then, rather than linger on this dark tone, we cut to Harry, who, in that chapter, we learn is using Sirius Black's reputation to gain better treatment from the Dursley, and later still, there is a hilarious interaction of Mr. Weasley trying to come collect Harry for the Quidditch World Cup, using the Flu Network, and the prank that Dudley gets pulled on him by Fred and George with a Tung-Tung Toffee. And Rowling keeps this balancing act of grim and dark moments with humor and levity going until the final chapters, where she really begins to emphasize the darker path this series is going to take moving forward, with the return of Voldemort, the death of Cedric, and the marshalling of his Death Eaters. And at the end of Goblet of Fire, I really like this, but I recall it becoming pretty exhausting by the time I was halfway through Order of the Phoenix, and maybe that'll change on a reread. But regardless of my thoughts on that book, they're not relevant here, so at least the tone shift for Goblet of Fire worked really, really well. And I have been focusing a lot on the mood and tone of Goblet, but that isn't the only place where this book shines. It especially is bright when it comes to the characterization of almost all the people in this book, even ones we've known for a while. And honestly, Rowling must have been looking like that scene from SpongeBob where he's writing the word "the," because it was on a whole other level from any of her previous entries in the series. Granted, that doesn't mean I personally liked all of them, namely what she did with Ron, and honestly, Ron goes through a lot in these next couple of books. In this book, he kind of sucks, he has a stint in Half-Blood Prince where he's unsufferable, and maybe there's truth to the saying that love conquers all, because Hermione is a better person than me for taking him back after what he does in Deathly Hallows. But for about 6 to 7 chapters in Goblet of Fire, Ron's character hits an all-time low. And look, to an extent, I can sympathize with Ron, even from book 1, when all he has to eat on the train are the corned beef sandwiches, which he states that his mother knows that he doesn't like, to him having to go through all of year 2 with a broken wand due to his family's financial situation, and even being the only Weasley that doesn't get decent-looking dress robes. I understand how that plays into his insecurities, but I hate the way that he puts that on Harry. I mean, yes, Harry has fame that constantly outshines everybody, but I hate that Ron seems to have developed an amnesia when it comes to remembering why Harry's famous in the first place. And granted, When they have that fight in the Gryffindor common room, Ron almost seems to get it, but the two are too stubborn that they can't even work it out. And I mean, I know they're kids, but seeing Ron act so poorly towards his best friend who's never done anything but right to him and who's clearly in distress is just not a good look. And the worst part is that even if you can look past his treatment of Harry, he's still the absolute worst to Hermione in this book due to his jealousy and his quickly developing feelings for her. I honestly don't know who has Ron as their favorite character in this book. I feel like if you're ranking the trio, spots 1 and 2 are interchangeable between Harry and Hermione depending on preference, with Ron coming in as a distant third. But if you are a Ron stan, I could imagine how difficult this book was for you. Hermione, on the other hand, is killing it this whole book. I know that Harry views Ron as best friend number 1, but nothing has ever proven Harry's poor judgment more than that, because Hermione was holding it down all book long, from believing him from the jump, to helping him prepare for the tasks, to ending Rita Skeeter's poor journalistic practices and smear campaign by discovering she was an unregistered animagus. Hermione showed why Harry needs to be the one to sort out his priorities in this book. Also, between Harry and Hermione, there was a lot of outside pushing towards this romantic angle, and I don't know if it was Rowling trying to test the waters with that potential pairing or not, but it was interesting, and it was also cool to see Hermione's more mischievous side come out, as she started to feel more fleshed out as a character, and it almost felt like you could see the influences of hanging out around Ron and Harry for years have started to take on the way that she thinks. The only bad thing I really have to say about Hermione is that she kinda seems to be playing a bit with Victor Krumm's emotions. I mean, not really. I mean, like, granted, it's not like Hermione owes him anything just because they went to the dance together, but the way Hermione kinda like waves Victor off after the second task to check on Harry was one of those moments where I kind of felt bad for the guy. I mean, like, he's trying to develop a real human connection here, and unfortunately, it's just wrong time, wrong place, and you almost feel bad for him, you know? And rounding out the Golden Trio, this was also Harry's best book. Harry's always been an underdog, despite his prestige and legendary status in the eyes of outside wizards, because in reality, he's a 14-year-old kid with an aptitude for defense against the dark arts, and his entry into the Triwizard Tournament puts that disparity between Harry Potter the mythical figure and Harry Potter the actual kid into way clearer view. His need to rely on his friends for every task, his constant fits of nervousness and fear, and that emotional fog he gets at the end of the book where everything just becomes so overwhelming for him, really turns him into an actual person. Harry's never felt more authentically human than in this book, and it does wonders for his character. And that was all just me talking about the Golden Trio. I haven't even spent time on the way Hagrid, Sirius, and Percy, oh my god, Percy, the way they all evolve in this story. I mean, the way Hagrid continues to be this nurturing and supportive force for Harry is beautiful, and the parallels between the two that come into light and the reason behind Hagrid's fierce protectiveness of Harry is extremely touching, as is the way that Sirius is willing to risk the Dementor's kiss at a moment's notice if it means protecting Harry. You can really feel the desperation he has to make it up to Harry, Lily, and James for his absence in Harry's life, and his desire to be a real godfather to Harry, despite the circumstances. And then there's Percy, and Percy, well, all I have to say about that is that Rowling is really good at writing insufferable characters. The Sorting Hat states it's never sorted anyone incorrectly, but honestly, I think he got a bit lazy with Percy. He saw a redheaded Weasley and threw him into Gryffindor when he definitely belonged in Slytherin. I mean, this man is the absolute worst, and he is going to stay awful for 3 books. If you loved Percy, I don't know why, but if you did, good luck moving forward. This was really not a great book for the Weasleys. And then, of course, there are a few characters that deserve some real praise in the books that aren't part of our traditional main cast, and that is the characters of Neville Longbottom, Cedric Diggory, and Alistair Moody / Crouch Jr. And Neville has always been kind of someone you would just describe as, oh yeah, he was there. Like, he's never really focused on other than to be the butt of the joke, but damn, we finally start getting the breadcrumbs of Neville's past in this book. And from this point on, Neville honestly becomes side character number 1, because as we learn the truth about Neville's relationship to the prophecy and what he's endured because of it, he just becomes an extremely sympathetic character and someone you root for without hesitation. And speaking of rooting for someone, Cedric Diggory. Cedric is honestly the epitome of the nice guy persona, but in the least cringy way possible. He's almost set up like the typical storybook protagonist, and the way he acts as an ally to Harry, and the way they watch each other's backs as the story continues makes his end truly impactful. The death of innocence is a theme that bookends Goblet of Fire, and the way the story begins with the death of Frank and basically ends with the death of Cedric in his memorial really puts emphasis on the way that Harry's hero's journey is going to unfold in the coming entries. One thing that Rowling had to work on is that Voldemort had been propped up forever as a horror, and with him finally being restored in this book, we begin to feel the impact of it immediately. Just instantly when he returns, there is dread in the air, in the tension, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later, but it was really well done. And finally, last side character I want to talk about before we get into more stuff is Alistair Moody, aka Barty Crouch Jr., and what a sicko this guy is. He's a character so difficult to talk about because his impersonation of Moody is so spot on that it even fools Dumbledore nearly until the end of the book. So in a way I can say that I love Mad-Eye Moody, but I can't say that firmly because in reality it's Crouch. But putting that conundrum aside, Moody Crouch is a character that works extremely well. He's cunning in the way he assists Harry, he's intimidating, and he's twisted. Learning that Neville's parents were tortured by the Cruciatus Curse and that he was one of the people who did it, and then further using it in front of Neville is just sick, and it really goes to show just on a broader aspect how disgusting the Death Eaters are. And now that I'm thinking about it, you know what else this book deserves praise for? Every single Harry Potter book has a twist in it. Some are small, some are large, but it's something we've grown to expect in the series. But one thing I really want to praise is that I want you to take yourself back to when you first read this book. Did you predict the twist? Because I didn't. But getting to reread the series and knowing what's coming lets you pick up on so many clues, like Moody's or Crouch's stealing of the Polyjuice potion ingredients, for instance, that makes almost everything make sense, everything except the overall design of the plan. You know, the Super Carlin brothers have often joked about how Voldemort would be a terrible wedding planner, not just because he doesn't understand the concept of love, but because he also always does the most. And this is no different. Having Crouch bewitch a powerful magical artifact to make Harry a contestant for the Triwizard Tournament, and then making Crouch assist Harry undetected in winning a tournament he had no hopes of winning on his own, just to get him into the graveyard seems like so much work, especially because we learn that anything can be turned into a portkey so early in the book, and that portkeys work in Hogwarts. Like, honestly, there had to have been an easier way to do this. And in other complaining news, the Triwizard Tournament sucks. Like, not as an idea, but the tasks are awful for a sport where a live audience has to watch. I actually have a video plan on how I would modify the tasks to be better, but I couldn't help but think how awkward it must have been for the spectators to just be watching a lake and waiting to see who comes up. But I digress, because what the Triwizard Tournament does well is two things. The first is that it expands on the world-building aspects, establishing that there is more than one magical school and that the heads of these schools have the capacity to meet and discuss regularly was a very nice addition to the world of Harry Potter. The second is that it sets a roadmap for this book to follow and keep the pacing tight, because this book is massive. My copy has 734 pages, and there's so much in this review I didn't even talk about, like how Barty Crouch Sr. got his son out of Azkaban in the first place, or SPEW and our reunion with Dobby, who was trying to help with Winky's depression, or how Bagman was in debt to the goblins and Fred and George and was trying to help Harry win in order to clear his debts. All of these things, had there not been a consistent through line, could have served to make this book feel incredibly bloated. And while I did find the events surrounding the second task kind of a drag, I was never bored or felt like I was having my time wasted, and I couldn't imagine how disorganized this book could have felt without the tasks to keep the story moving. But I think the final thing to discuss is how Rowling maintained the dramatic tension and set up so many future mysteries in the graveyard at the end of the book. I said this earlier, but since book 1, Voldemort had been built up as a threat that, should he ever return to full power, would be a major issue, and in the graveyard you feel that immediately. The way he toyed with Harry and how effortlessly he could have killed Harry had he not made one dumb mistake and had their wands not been twins was chilling. The mistake I'm talking about, of course, is Voldemort taking Harry's blood into himself, but maybe I can do a video on that later too. All the same, Rowling wanted to show just how much of a monstrous powerhouse and how ruthless Voldemort was, and she delivered on that perfectly. Though I imagine if you were a first-time reader of the series, you might be a little annoyed at how Harry seemed to escape death again. It feels a little Deus Ex Machina, but I promise it makes sense if you just keep reading. But I've been talking for a while, so I'll just say this. If I were to think back on all the books in the series so far, and was asked to make a choice on which of them I think is the most masterfully written, I'd say hands down it's Goblet of Fire. And while it might seem like I say this with every new entry into the series, I can promise you that should my memory of Order of the Phoenix hold up, I won't be saying it next video. From the way Rowling effortlessly calls the reader back upon previous information, such as Voldemort's wand being twin with Harry's, to a statement that Voldemort makes where he fears he's lost Severus due to his witnessing of Severus's treatment of Quirrell in year 1, to the purpose behind the Horcruxes getting mentioned in the graveyard, as well as the way Rowling begins to guide readers into the darker path the story will be taking moving forward, it could be said that Goblet of Fire provides a new foundation for the wizarding world. Whereas Philosopher's Stone sets up the foundation for a lighthearted and whimsical adventure that happens in Hogwarts, Goblet of Fire sets up the war to come, and for that reason, while I don't think it is the peak of the series, I can tell you that it is more than understandable if you choose to rank Goblet of Fire as your favorite entry into the series. It truly is fantastic. Also, I have to say this before I go, but man, Fudge really fell off between books 3 and 4. I mean...
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Hey there guys, thank you all so much for watching. I did have an outro recorded, but unfortunately audio files messed up, so I'm just doing it real quick here. But if you enjoyed this video, Ranking Potter is a series, so we are on book 4. Obviously, there are 3 more just like it. I'll post the latest one on screen now. Also, I am not just a book reviewer, I do some video essays too. If you've been on my channel, you know. And if you'd like to see some more Harry Potter related video essays, check out the one I did on the fate of Remus Lupin. But until next time, regardless of whatever it is you choose to do next, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Peace.